Daily Words of God. God, in His first incarnation, did not complete the work of incarnation. He only completed the first step of the work that it was necessary for God to do in the flesh. So, in order to finish the work of incarnation, God has returned to the flesh once again, living out all the normality and reality of the flesh. That is, making God's Word manifest in an entirely normal and ordinary flesh, thereby concluding the work that He left undone in the flesh. In essence, the second incarnate flesh is like the first, but it is even more real, even more normal than the first. As a consequence, the suffering the second incarnate flesh endures is greater than that of the first. But this suffering is a result of His ministry in the flesh, which is unlike the suffering of corrupted man. It also stems from the normality and reality of His flesh. Because He performs His ministry in utterly normal and real flesh, the flesh must endure a great deal of hardship. The more normal and real this flesh is, the more He will suffer in the performance of His ministry. God's work is expressed in a very common flesh, one that is not supernatural at all. Because His flesh is normal and must also shoulder the work of saving man, He suffers in even greater measure than a supernatural flesh would. And all this suffering stems from the reality and normality of His flesh. From the suffering that the two incarnate fleshes have undergone while performing their ministries, one can see the essence of the incarnate flesh. The more normal the flesh, the greater hardship he must endure while undertaking the work. The more real the flesh that undertakes the work, the harsher people's notions, and the more dangers are likely to befall him. And yet, the more real the flesh is, and the more the flesh possesses the needs and complete sense of a normal human being, the more capable he is of taking on God's work in the flesh. It was Jesus' flesh that was nailed to the cross, His flesh that He gave up as a sin offering. It was by means of a flesh with normal humanity that He defeated Satan and completely saved man from the cross. And it is as a complete flesh that God, in His second incarnation, performs the work of conquest and defeats Satan. Only a flesh that is completely normal and real can perform the work of conquest in its entirety and bear powerful testimony. That is to say, the conquest of man is made effective through the reality and normality of God in the flesh, not through supernatural miracles and revelations. The ministry of this incarnate God is to speak, and thereby to conquer and perfect man. In other words, the work of the Spirit realized in the flesh's duty, is to speak and thereby conquer, reveal, perfect, and eliminate man completely. And so, it is in the work of conquest that God's work in the flesh will be accomplished in full. The initial work of redemption was only the beginning of the work of incarnation. The flesh that performs the work of conquest will complete the entire work of incarnation. In gender, one is male and the other female, so completing the significance of God's incarnation and dispelling man's notions of God, God can become both male and female, and in essence, the incarnate God is genderless. He made both man and woman, and to him there is no division of gender. In this stage of the work, God does not perform signs and wonders, so that the work will achieve its results by means of words. The reason for this, moreover, is because the work of God incarnate this time is not to heal the sick and cast out demons, but to conquer man by speaking, which is to say that the native ability possessed by this incarnate flesh of God is to speak words and to conquer man, not to heal the sick and cast out demons. His work in normal humanity is not to perform miracles, not to heal the sick and cast out demons, but to speak. And so the second incarnate flesh seems to people much more normal than the first. People see that God's incarnation is no lie, but this incarnate God is different from Jesus incarnate. And though they are both God incarnate, they are not completely the same. Jesus possessed normal humanity, ordinary humanity, but he was accompanied by many signs and wonders. In this incarnate God, human eyes will see no signs or wonders, neither healing the sick, nor driving out demons, nor walking on the sea, nor fasting for 40 days. He does not do the same work that Jesus did, not because, in essence, his flesh is any different from Jesus's, but because it is not his ministry to heal the sick and cast out demons. He does not tear down his own work, does not disturb his own work. Since he conquers man through his real words, there is no need to subdue him with miracles. And so this stage is to complete the work of incarnation. The incarnate God you see today is entirely of flesh, and there is nothing supernatural about him. He gets sick as others do, needs food and clothing just as others do. He is wholly of flesh. If this time around God incarnate performed supernatural signs and wonders, if he healed the sick, cast out demons, or could kill with one word, how could the work of conquest be carried out? How could the work be spread among the Gentile nations? Healing the sick and casting out demons was the work of the age of grace. It was the first step in the work of redemption. And now that God has saved man from the cross, he no longer performs that work. If, during the last days, a God the same as Jesus appeared, one who healed the sick, cast out demons, and was crucified for man, that God, though identical to the description of God in the Bible and easy for man to accept, would not, in its essence, be the flesh worn by the Spirit of God, but by an evil spirit. For it is the principle of God's work never to repeat what he has already completed. And so, the work of God's second incarnation is different from the work of the first. In the last days, God realizes the work of conquest in an ordinary, normal flesh. He does not heal the sick, will not be crucified for man, but simply speaks words in the flesh and conquers man in the flesh. Only such flesh is God's incarnate flesh. Only such flesh can complete God's work in the flesh.